So, homesteading. So, this was kind of a big deal before this whole pandemic thing happened. But now, basically, all the seed stores are out of seed. Um, Basically, people trying to buy chicks. Nobody has chicks anymore. So, everybody's kind of come to the idea of trying to be more self sufficient as far as food. And we've actually been doing this. Well, we've only been doing this in our new house for a few months, but we've had chickens before and really enjoyed it. So we actually got some in August, and we now have chickens producing quite a few eggs. So we're in a pretty good situation. All right, so this is our garden. We fenced it basically so that we wouldn't have to deal with the deer, because we've got this big prairie over here, and the deer don't really like to hang out in the prairie, but they do a little bit, especially around the edges. They do like to bed in it quite a bit. So we put in some raised beds. We've got 4 raised beds, and we've got the basically the landscape cloth down to keep the prairie that we kind of took over, at least this little part, from growing up from the bottom. So these are some beets that actually one of my students started from seed and left from last semester, so I just took them home and kept them alive, and I threw them in this garden bed. Hopefully they'll do something. This is mostly potatoes. See the white stuff? That's actually chicken bedding, because we don't really have good access to compost right now, because we just started this area, just started at this house, so we don't really have the best compost ready to go, and it's kind of hard to buy it with all the crazy stuff going on. So I'm hoping to put in some more seeds. These are some purple cabbage, which are just starting to come up. I put these in a little bit later than some of the other plants, and they just kind of coming up in here. But hopefully the potatoes will start coming up eventually. Over here, this is the first one I did. This is turnips, because I like turnips a lot. And I put that cover on there mostly to keep the chickens out. It's kind of extra at this point. So I've got peas. It's the first time I've grown peas. Then I've got some kale here. Alright, so this is kind of a little area on the side of our house that's kind of intended to be an orchard area. And well, this particular tree over here, we had a white pine that died, so hopefully this one doesn't die also. It's looking a lot healthier. But we have, so far, we've got the wild plums that have showed up. They came with the house. And I've got this apple tree right here. You can tell this top part that didn't really make it in terms of hardening off. These are the plums, natural plums. They just showed up. They were here with the house. This is a native plant. They're not really bothered by Japanese beetles. The plums are not always super tasty, but you can make pretty good jam out of them, and they're really kind of a nice sized plant. They're not too large. So they're a really neat plant. The ones that I have planted, this guy over here, this is a pear. And this is supposed to be a disease-resistant pear called Blake's Pride. Planted this one in the fall. This is one of the reasons I like fall planting, because they acclimatize pretty much to your climate immediately, and so they come out in the spring pretty much when the normal plants would come out in the spring. However, I can show you guys my spring planted ones over here. These, it's just starting to come out. This is King David. You can see the graft down here, probably budded at the bottom. This came from a nursery called Trees of Antiquity. If you look at my video, I have a video of actually planting this particular tree. Focus, you bugger. There you go. So I've got this one. Then I've got the Liberty apple, which is right here. And it's not showing a whole lot yet in terms of growth. These are probably a little too close together, but I didn't want to accidentally cut my gas line. And this is Monark. This is one that's really not very commercially available. It's one of the parents of an apple called Rave. It's just starting to leaf out. So you can see the difference between these three that were spring planted. They're pretty delayed versus this guy over here, the Enterprise apple. So the Enterprise apple, notice I planted this in the fall. I got this from Grandpa's orchard. So that's Enterprise. And it's already pretty well leafed out. So the spring planted, they don't hit the ground running the way the fall planted ones do. But unfortunately, it's really hard. So I tried in the fall to get plants because we bought our house basically in late summer, and that's a terrible time to plant. So I was going to plant in the fall, but I actually couldn't get most of what I wanted. So this was pretty much, this and that pear tree were the only things that I planted in the fall. But it's a really good time to plant, especially if you're in a fairly cold climate like ours. So hopefully these guys will all pollinate each other. Well, not all. The apples will pollinate the apples, and the pears will pollinate the pears, and the plums will pollinate the plums. Yeah, the only bad thing about this native plum is it does sucker quite a bit, but if you have a space like we do that's fairly near a power line, it doesn't get too tall. Actually doesn't really interfere with the power line too much, so it does pretty well. All right, so this is one of the two pear trees that I got from Stark Brothers, which is actually based in Missouri. So this is a sunrise pear. This one looked pretty beat up when I got it. I mean, let's be realistic. Especially up here, it's really not looking so hot. It's kind of blackened and not looking too good. But if we look down here, it is greening up. So this I got a little bit earlier than some of those other trees. So if you get a spring shipment, it's good to get it fairly early. So this is just a little whip of a tree. And unfortunately, everything around there, almost, not quite everything, but a lot of it's poison ivy, which is one of the problems I have with this particular yard. And I got another pear tree also from Stark Brothers, which for some reason their label is upside down. This is Moonglow. And this one is, it's a much thicker tree, but it's just starting to leaf out. So just a little bit. So if you saw the one that I planted in the fall, basically it was fully leafed out. And this guy's just getting going. So again, that's why I prefer fall, but Stark Brothers sells better stuff generally in the spring. All right, so this is another one of our potential nut trees. This is Sleeping Giant. It's a hybrid chestnut. Supposedly it is American, Chinese, and Japanese all hybridized together in some weird way. And this actually produces really large nuts. Compared to the Ozark chinkapin, this would be much, much bigger. But it's not a native tree, and I don't know how well it's going to do or how well it's going to produce, but it's supposed to be good for our state. So this is one, like many trees, it actually does require a pollinator. So I'll come over here and show you the pollinator. This is the Chinese chestnut, and this, I just put these little cones on here to basically protect it from being damaged. If you see right here, oh, there we go. Anyway, these are stipules from last year. And this is just a signaling, and we need this Chinese chestnut so that it can pollinate the Sleeping Giant over there, because they're not self-fertile. Next to the last tree is this tree right here. And this is persimmon. So this is a persimmon. This I also got from Forest Keeling Nursery, and it's actually called Elmo. So why is it called Elmo? Because it's kind of an orange. The fruits of persimmon are an orange color. This is American persimmon, Diospyros virginiana. So I'm not expecting fruit from this super soon, although persimmons do fruit at quite a young age, especially this one since, of course, it is grafted. The graft is actually, you can see what's left of the parafilm down there. Right there, you can actually see what's left of the graft unit, so it looks like it was a whip and tongue graft. Right, so down here, away in this little bottomland, there's a reason it's down here, is the last tree I'm going to talk about as far as our food products. You might say, why did you put it down here? And that's because it's a very special kind of tree. This is another Missouri native like the persimmon. So this is kind of a native agricultural crop. This one right here, wow, it's actually got flower buds on it. I just realized that. This guy right here, this is a pawpaw. So this is a pawpaw tree, a Simna triloba. This was also, I purchased from Forest Keeling. It's pretty big for a pawpaw. And the reason I put it here is I found some wild pawpaws actually right in this area. The forest that we live next to is kind of second growth, maybe third growth, I don't know. But there are some pawpaws that are very slowly regenerating in here, and they're a little bit harder to find right now. This one's big enough that I can see it pretty well. But anyway, pawpaws are an understory tree, meaning that they like kind of a moist, shady environment. Especially they do really well in kind of a forest edge that's pretty wet. And that's pretty much what we've got here. So my plan is to kind of eventually slowly get pawpaws to go all the way around this little forest edge that we have right here. And hopefully eventually these will also produce fruit that is edible by humans. It's actually pretty tasty stuff. It's kind of mushy. They call it, another name for it is Ohio banana or Indiana banana. Got these really neat buds. Get to focus on them. That's actually the terminal bud up there that looks like a little leaf. They've got these fuzzy little brown buds. Very neat tree. More people should really grow it. It's kind of got a tropical character. I personally have a lot of trouble with being able to eat it raw because it's really mushy. But what's really neat you can do with it, you can make it into different things. So you can make it into things like ice cream and cookies and pudding and sauces, all that kind of stuff. So it's a neat plant. So this one I think is NC-1 or something like that. It came from a breeding program elsewhere, not in Missouri. But it is interesting that it has flower buds down here. So it's technically possible that it could actually produce fruit this year. The problem is, like many of these trees, it does require a pollinator. It's monoecious, so it's unisexual. But the problem is the pawpaws that are around here, which I don't know if I can even find them, are very tiny. And I don't think the wild pawpaws that are here, are going to be producing flowers this soon. Now maybe there are more pawpaws farther away, but they're kind of notorious for having bad pollination. They're actually fly pollinated. They have kind of a maroon flower that opens really early in the spring, and the only pollinators that are out apparently are pretty much flies. So that is basically their specialization. I'll see if I can find one of these pawpaws.